Okay, this video is going to cover Station 5, which is asking us to give the domain and the range of the following functions in interval notation. So letter A is a graph. The domain is going to refer to all of the x values included in this graph. In this case, the x values range from -4 to +4 with no interruptions. So that should be our domain. Again, we kind of need to think of it as us looking at the shadow of the graph on the x-axis. The domain runs from -4 to +4, and we don't have any holes in the x values where it is not defined. So we don't need to worry too much about having interruptions. Our domain should simply be -4 to +4. The range is the y values, which run from +1 up to +4, again with no interruptions. When we look at that one, when we look at the range, we're looking at the shadow of the graph on the y-axis. Notice that it runs from 1 to 4 when we move all the points to the y-axis. So that's it for domain and range on letter A. On letter B, we do have some holes to worry about. So the domain, notice the arrow that says that this graph goes forever, which means it starts at -infinity and it runs to this first hole at -3. Now notice I'm using an open bracket symbol at -3 because that value is not included in the domain. Okay, if we moved everything to the x-axis, the domain goes to infinity. Okay? But from there, we still have two other pieces to define because the function is defined everywhere between -3 and +2 as well. So we'd say from -3 to +2. Again, that 2 is an open circle. And finally from 2 all the way over to +5, which is a closed circle. Again, if we move all the points to the x-axis, we've still got those holes, but overall, that's our range. It runs in those pieces. Okay? For the range, it's a little bit easier because we don't have a bunch of different pieces to define. Again, we're looking at the y values if we moved everything to the y-axis. So the range, it begins at -3 and it runs to +2. It includes every y value in between, but it does not include -3. So we have this open circle at -3. Everything else along the way is defined. Okay? Everything else in between, there is a x value that leads to that range value. Okay? And mostly that's because of this piece over here. That's the one that really gives us the range because it covers this gap. It covers this hole. It covers this hole. Okay? The only thing it doesn't have is a value at -3. Finally, we have an actual equation. Again, we shouldn't really need to think about what that looks like, but it is a quadratic equation. It has been shifted 1 unit to the right and 3 units up. Okay, so the vertex is there, and it does open up. So when we think about this, the domain of every quadratic equation is always all real numbers, -infinity to infinity. And the range, well, that would start at 3 and go to infinity because 3 is the y value of the vertex. Okay? This value here tells us where the range starts. I'm pretty sure that does it for Station 5. Yes, it does. Thank you very much for your time. On to Station 6.